I believe this is a Ford factory piece off newer cars that actually Ford realized there was a problem. So they created these heat sinks and mounted the TFI module on this heat sink up usually on the front of the car. I think up near the radiator. We'll see where we're going to mount it. I'm not sure yet. I've got some aluminum tape, some speaker wire, my thermal paste, the TFI tool, some shrink tubing, and blade connectors. Now my blade connectors are a little bit of a problem. I'm missing one. I need one more, so I'm going to have to go buy some of these. Now I'm missing one more critical piece to be able to complete this job, and that is the actual 3-wire cable needed to go from the distributor down to the remote location of the TFI module. The one other thing I might need is some black RTV, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So right now we're going to run to Lowe's, and I'm going to show you the wire that I'm going to buy there. So I ended up going to Lowe's, and I've got some of this cable, and if you go to Lowe's, they've got all different types of cable and cord. And what I went with was the 14-3, and it has 3 wires in it. So this will allow us to hook up to the 3 wires from the PIP to the TFI module. So we're going to build and shield this cable when we get home. So after going to Lowe's, I now have a complete kit of what I think I need. I got my, I believe, 14 gauge 3-wire, some heat shrink tubing, thermal paste, TFI tool, heat sink, aluminum tape, speaker wire, some electrical tape, and some female disconnect, different sizes if needed. I bought some extra. So I think this is about all I need. So let's give it a whirl. I'm sure something else will come up, but the first step is we're going to remove the TFI module and determine the location of where we're going to mount. All right, so I'm using this tool. I don't know if you can see that or not. And you just put it in there, spin it off. Sometimes it's tight. If it's tight, you can put I think it's a 13mm wrench on this tool. The only other thing is you gotta be really careful not to drop these bolts. It's gonna fall down in there somewhere. Oh, like I almost lost it. Saved it though. So that's the first one. Second one is kind of back in there behind the power steering pump. Forgive some of my wiring mess here. I haven't cleaned everything up yet. All right, so I'm just spinning that out. A couple extra spins, make sure it's out. This heatsink is really dirty in the center, and the TFI module mount inside of this. So I'm just gonna, I got some Hunter Grit, a little sanding block thing I bought at Walmart, and I'm just block sanding really quick. All I'm trying to do is create a metal to metal surface contact, so when we put the thermal paste on it, it actually transmits the heat into the heat sink. So I'll just finish that up. This is an example of me not thinking ahead. I'm thinking, oh, the TFI module is going to slip right down in here. Everything's going to work great. The bolt holes line up. What could be more awesome than that? But these cars must use a different TFI module, and the plugs must come out of the top rather than the side. So I've got to do something different here. So some of you might think I'm crazy, but what I'm doing is grinding some of these fins out so that the TFI connectors can poke through, and then I'll run the wiring in on this side, and this will be able to mount into its factory location. I'll still have all the heatsink here, some of the heatsink here, and I might modify it some more to add some more heatsink, but I don't know, I'm comfortable with it. We'll see what happens. So on the Sawzall, I just kept cutting back down as far as I could. Then I would switch the other direction and cut this way. And I kept doing that in a pattern. And it only took maybe 5 minutes to get down to this point. The module already can fit in here perfectly. I'm in a good spot. I'm just going to grind this down smoother, just so I have enough access between this middle blade and that fin. Okay, so now I'm going to put my thermal paste on here for about the, I don't know, it feels like about the 5th time. We'll see if the latest idea works. I'm about to run out of thermal paste, and I did, but I think I have enough here to handle this in this setup. What I need to do, pull some of this back. All right, so we got thermal paste all the way down this, and now I'm going to throw the bolts in. Use the little TFI tool. All right, so these are tightened down pretty good. That's locked in place. I've got this frame rail. I've trunk mounted my battery, but I'm going to mount this TFI heatsink right here in the engine bay, and I'll be able to swap this TFI quickly if needed. The plug will be facing down, so some of the wiring will be hidden, and then I'll spray this black so it doesn't stand out so obvious. So I've drilled I think it's 11/64" hole, and I'm going to put these stainless steel bolts in here to hold this in place. I think I'm going to have to go a little bit bigger on the hole to get this to tap in, but that's the idea. Okay, so I've got the second bolt on here. I ended up having to use shorter bolts, and I bought a self-tapping stainless steel bolt. And I don't use this, I use this impact gun to get the threads started, but kind of walk it in by hand. it's real easy to over tighten and strip these out. So as soon as you feel it stop, that's good enough. So let me show you from this side. So you can see how it's mounted down. I'm gonna spray that black so it's not gonna stand out as much. We'll plug it in and we should be good to go. Now we're gonna make the cable to go up to the PIP connector. So I got up under the car and measured out a length of cable. It looks like about 2 feet, peeling back the casing to expose the 3 wires. Now when you do this, you're gonna have paper sticking out of this. And I just trimmed that back and then I trimmed the ends off each wire. So now I can put the female blade connectors on there. And I'm gonna do that to both sides. So I just use razor blades and wire cutters to strip these back. Okay, so one little trick is, well, this is the way I do things. Take these blade connectors and I remove that little plastic piece. See those little plastic covers? I just pull them off with a pair of pliers and then I crimp the end on here. And you'll notice I have shrink tubing on each wire along with a bigger piece of shrink tubing that I'm gonna cover the whole assembly with here when I'm done. This stuff is really nice, got off Amazon, has glue in it. It just shrinks down, it actually creates a glued seal within the wires. So this will get pushed up over that like that and shrink wrapped onto this, and then this bigger piece will come up under them. So I have a completely covered system when I'm done. Okay, and what we get is that. And the final step is to pull this up into place. Now this particular end happens to be for the TFI connection. So these wires are going to have to be pretty close together. So now we'll shrink wrap this piece here. Alright, so the initial wire looks like this. I'm going to do something very similar on the other. The only thing I'm worried about for the other end where it goes into the PIP is that the blades are far enough apart, but it should look just about like this. Okay, and this is the other side for the PIP. The only difference here is I left just a little extra wire out here, so I'd be able to work with it as I try to get it up in the distributor. One thing to take note is I have white, green, black, and on the other side, white, green, black. Actually this way, white, green, black. That way they're in the same order and we can make sure that we put them in correctly and we don't get any cross connections. What I'm trying to do is get some bare copper wire, and I have bought 8 feet of that 3-cord wire from Lowe's. And so I'm splitting that apart, and right now I'm taking one of the bare wires out of there and I'm going to cut the coating off this with a razor blade just so I get bare copper wire. And what we're leading up to is creating a shielding cable that will wrap around this, and then we're going to wrap this whole wire foil tape, and then we'll wrap it in vinyl electrical tape. So it's a 3-step process to create the shielding. And so right now I'm just trying to get bare copper wire. And it's kind of boring, but I'm just splitting that cable, and now I'm gonna use a razor blade. I'm gonna cut this coating off this. And if it's not enough, I'll have to do another wire. So that's kind of step 1. So I'll show you the finished product. Okay, so what I've done is I've wound the bare copper wire around this, and now I'm just spinning cable and wrapping the bare copper around it. And hoping that I get enough bare copper wire so I don't have to strip another one off. The good thing is the coating on the wires on the inside of this cable really soft, so it's not hard to cut it off. I mean, honestly, you could just pull it and it breaks every so often, so you have to, you know, keep starting a new piece, but it's nice and soft, which makes it easy. And what I'm going to do on the bottom side here is actually create another connector onto this bare copper piece, where we can tie this to ground so that this shielding will be grounded out to the chassis of the car. I don't think this has to be perfect, so I might show a little bit extra of this because it's tedious, but I'm using foil tape to wrap around the end of this. Sorry, I got choked up. I drank water and went down my windpipe. Alright, so I got the end wrapped in foil, and now I'm going to go diagonally so that we can just wrap this entire cable. And we're trying to get a snug fit so that this cable's not, you know, 4 feet thick. When we get done with it, it is going to be kind of thick, probably a little thicker than I'd like. But all right, so I've got the entire cable shielded in, well, I should say shielded. My version is shielding in aluminum tape with the wire sticking out on the end. Put a piece of little shrink tubing on that just to hold it in place. Now we're going to basically take the roll of vinyl tape, and I'm just going to wrap this entire thing. Okay, so totally wrapped in electrical tape. So now we've got something kind of looks like a cable. It's kind of flexible. It's not too bad. But I have 2 more steps I take before I say this cable. So I added heat shrink tubing wrapped to this, and I also put an eyelet on the end. This is the bare copper wire coming out, and we're actually going to bolt this down to the heat sink. We're going to pull one of the bolts out, the mounting bolts. Wrap this around it and tighten it back down. But this completes the wire. Normally what I would do at this point is put that electrical harness wrap around this to make it look nice, but I forgot to buy it. They do sell that at Lowe's, and I had it in my hand and I accidentally set it down. I've got my ground strap, that bare copper wire, going to this bolt, and I put the 3 blades on, white, green, black, and I tightened these up a little bit. I used a pair of pliers to squeeze these to make them a tight fit, and as a result I had to get them all on there at the same time and use a flat bladed screwdriver to press them in place, but they're on there pretty solid now. So now I got to work up on our distributor. I am a little worried given the tight fit over how this is going to work. So I always seem to make some really stupid mistake when I'm doing a project. And so this is the stupid mistake for today. On the PIP side, so at this point my GoPro had decided to die. And what I was basically saying is I had messed up by putting female terminals on both ends of the wires. And the correct way to do this is to have female on one side and male on the other. The male connectors, as pictured here, are needed to go into the PIP sensor located inside of the distributor. So on the side of the distributor, you're putting male plugs in, and on the side of the TFI module that's located remotely now, you need the female connectors. So don't make the mistake I did and get it right the first time. Now the other issue I ran into was the blade connectors, the width of the connector was too wide to go into the PIP connector. And so you'll see in this photo, I actually had to shave down the width of that blade connector. And I just took off a little bit at a time. I just gradually did this. I think I was using a grinder wheel, and you don't have to grind a lot. These are made out of very thin metal. And so you just kept making them more and more narrow until they would slip in a tight manner into the female connector of the PIP. So you're taking the male connector of your harness into the female connector on the PIP on the distributor. And so you've got to kind of, this is trial and error. And so the way I did this was before I actually crimped my connectors, I got 3 connectors that I knew that fit extremely well up into the distributor before I actually committed to crimping those connectors down. So that was some trial and error there. The only other thing that I can think that was a little bit tricky was you had to make sure your harness coming from the TFI module up to the distributor was zip tied up properly. The first time I drove the car, it actually fell down a little bit and touched my wheel and tore the coating off the outside of the wire. Now, there were no electrical issues. All I had to do was put some tape around it and re-zip tie it, but making sure that that wire is not exposed in any way to the tire will keep you from getting broken down. So guys, I don't YouTube professionally. I just do this as I do projects. And so, like and subscribe. Convince some others to subscribe. I do have a lot of video content that I publish out on a leisurely basis. And I have a backlog of probably at least 10 projects that I need to post up here. So if you get a chance, like and subscribe. I appreciate it. It'll give me a little bit more desire to post some more stuff out here. So thank you.